Hi, this is Dr. Gregory Sadler. I'm a professor of philosophy and the president and founder of an educational consulting company called Reason.io, where we put philosophy into practice. I've studied and taught philosophy for over 20 years, and I find that many people run into difficulties reading classic philosophical texts. Sometimes it's the way things are said or how the text is structured. But the concepts themselves are not always that complicated, and that's where I come in. To help students and lifelong learners, I've been producing longer lecture videos and posting them to YouTube. Many viewers say they find them useful. What you're currently watching is part of a new series of shorter videos, each of them focused on one core concept from an important philosophical text. I hope you find it useful as well. In Book 2 of Cicero's On the Nature of the Gods, as the Stoic Balbus is presenting his views, the Stoic views, on divine providence, they're going to take an interesting, argumentative detour, and it's translated as we may put aside elaborate argument, and we might actually more literally translate this as setting aside subtlety, subtilitate, of argument or disputing, disputandi, and gaze, as it were, with our own eyes. Actually, it's contemplare, but it is oculi, so it's things that we can actually look at, not just contemplating with the mind, upon what? The beauty, the pulchritudinem of the creations of divine providence as we declare them to be. So we can look at the universe that we are a part of and within and grasp something because of that. And this is going to be another kind of argument for the universe being providentially arranged. But there's an appeal here to something we could say less discursive and more direct. You see these beautiful, awe-inspiring things, and we should understand beauty in a very, very broad sense here. And from that, we are drawn to thinking that there's got to be some sort of great artificer or designer or arranger of all of these things. And it's set out in an interesting structure. They're going to begin with earth and finish talking about ether, and then there's going to be a lot of digression and using the poets to talk about the constellations that we're going to kind of skip over here. You can read the text and see what the selections from the poets actually have to say. But we saw just earlier in the text an invocation of these four elements: earth, water, air, and ether, fire being part of ether in this text at least. And each of these is going to be discussed, and you could think of earth and the sea as being at least on the same level. And then we have air, and then we have a higher level of ether. So we're moving outward in the universe. And he begins by talking about, let's think about the whole earth. Now, obviously, you can't see the whole earth, right? You do have to contemplate that with your mind. Situated in the center of the world, a solid spherical mass gathered into a globe by the natural gravitation of all of its parts, clothed with all sorts of plants. What kinds? Flowers and grass and trees and corn, forms of vegetation, all of them incredibly numerous and inexhaustibly varied and diverse. So that's supposed to be a spectacle, right? We think of the earth itself as this massive globe in the center of everything, and then the incredible variety of plants growing upon it that are adding to the beauty there. And then he's going to talk about what we could call natural features or formations, cool fountains ever flowing, transparent streams and rivers, deep vaulted caverns, craggy rocks, sheer mountain heights and plains of immeasurable extent, hidden veins of gold and silver and marble in unlimited quantity. All beautiful things made even more beautiful by being part of this vast, complex globe that contains them all, provides them all, offers them to us. And wait, there's more, as the commercials say. We also have animals, right? So he says, think of the various species of animals, both tame and wild. Think of the flights and songs of birds, pastures filled with cattle, the teeming of the woodlands. And then we have the best animal of all, human beings, appointed tillers of the soil, who suffer it not to become a savage haunt of monstrous beasts of prey, nor a barren waste of thickets and brambles, and whose industry diversifies and adorns the lands and islands and coasts with houses and cities. And then he brings this to a close. So the first part that we're talking about, could we behold these things with our eyes as we can picture them in our minds? No one taking in the whole earth at one view could doubt the divine reason. So if we actually think about these things, then we should be led to have this, kind of aesthetic response of, wow, this is amazing. There must be some divine reason behind this. Then we go on to the next main element, water. In this case, the sea, the mare, right? So he says, how great is the beauty, the pulchritudo, of the sea, right? Why? Well, first of all, there's the sea itself. And there's a very interesting thing being noted here. The appearance, the specie of its great expanse, of its universi, how it spreads, right? So thinking about the ocean as a totality, that's what you're trying to picture there. And then he talks about the islands and the shores, right? How lovely the scenery of the coasts and shores. Then he talks about marine animals. Now, notice he doesn't talk about plants here, but how different the species of marine animals, some dwelling in the depths, some floating on the surface, some clinging in their own shells to the rocks. And then one other factor, the sea itself, in its connection to the shore. Yearning for the earth, sporting against her shores in such a fashion, the two elements appear to be fused in one. Now, when you think about it that way, that could be quite beautiful, could it not? And you could respond, again, in a sort of aesthetic way. Then we have the air, and the air is above the sea and the earth, and the air is offering us other prospects for grasping beauty. He says, the air bordering on the sea undergoes alternations of day and night, rises upward, melted and rarefied, gets condensed and compressed into clouds, gathering moisture, enriches the earth with rain, now flows forth in currents to and fro and produces wind. So all these meteorological phenomena have a kind of beauty to them. He also says it causes the yearly variations of cold and heat, so the seasons themselves. And then two other interesting things. The flights of birds. It's what allows there to be this beautiful flying on the part of the birds. And even more important, inhaled by breathing nourishes and sustains the animal race. And then we get to the ether, and now we're getting to yet more cosmic phenomena. We're moving out from the sublunary realm to the superlunary realm, the realm that includes the moon, the lowest of the natural bodies, heavenly bodies, all the way up to the firmament of the stars. So he talks about the sun, and the sun can be quite beautiful if we think about it. He says, there remains the element most distant and highest removes, the all engirdling, all confining circuit of the sky, named the ether. wherein those fiery shapes most marvelously trace out their ordered courses. Of these, the sun, which many times surpasses the earth in magnitude, revolves around her and is rising and setting causes day and night, right? Then we talk about the moon, at half the size of the earth, according to the mathematicians, bestowing upon the earth light it is borrowed from the sun and undergoing diverse changes of its light. And these are beautiful things. And then we have the wandering stars, what we call the planets. And they didn't recognize all of the planets that we do, but they certainly talked about Mercury, Venus, Mars, Jupiter, and Saturn, right? And then we have the vast multitude of the fixed stars grouped in constellations, so clearly defined they've received names derived from their resemblance to familiar objects. And here is where he invokes for pages after pages the poetry of Aratus, which we don't need to worry about too much. What is the upshot of this entire exercise? Well, he's going to conclude this section by saying, can any sane person, any healthy person, believe that all of this was created from random atoms, the way the Epicureans think? Or indeed any other being that lacks mind, mens, and reason, ratio? And he says, no, you can't appreciate the beauty of all of these things and think that it's just random stuff that just happened to be that way. So he's going to say, not merely did their creation postulate intelligence, but it's impossible to understand their nature without intelligence of a, it's translated here, high order, but we could actually say highest reason, summa ratione, right? The greatest, the peak, the highest type of rationality, that of God itself, capital G, which is indeed for the Stoics the entire universe. And certainly, as we've seen earlier in this text, the earth itself. So this is an interesting alternative way of getting to argue that there's a providential arranging to the universe, which is one of the key doctrines for the Stoics. We find it through contemplating the beauty of things in the earth, in the sea, the air, and in the heavens above.